My name is Adam French. From an early age, I learned that I couldn't trust adults. I learned quickly in my house, you don't talk about your feelings. So I packed my clothes in a garbage bag. I'm gonna live in my car. I had $20. I got indicted for trafficking cocaine in 2009. Next thing you know, I wake up in a jail cell. And I just felt like nothing. I wouldn't wish on nobody. She says, "This is God." She gave me more hope that 5-minute call than I had in 25 years. I always say that I didn't get arrested, I got rescued. My dad, his alcoholism has continued to grow. He went to the gun cabinet and got a gun. He was threatening to kill us. It was just a crazy night. Felt like a normal life probably till 5 or 6. I started realizing that things were different in my house. My name is Adam French. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in a double wide trailer, 30 minutes from the nearest Walmart or anything like that, kind of without a care in the world. Spent most of my time running in the creek behind my house, playing with my dog, and it felt like a normal life probably till about the age of 5 or 6. I started realizing that things were different in my house. On the weekends, my parents would put us in the car and we would go to the lake and to this little creek, and there's just a lot of partying going on. A lot of loud music, a lot of fighting, a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol. I didn't know at the time, but from an early age, I learned that I couldn't trust adults, and I started to feel uneasy around the adults in my life. Um, I can remember distinctively the first fist fight I ever saw between two grown men. I remember seeing the blood. I remember the screaming. And so I just stayed on edge, never really knowing what would happen next. My dad, every morning, 5 a.m., his feet hit the ground. He went to work, hard-nosed construction guy. Didn't really say a lot when he got home, but he was a hard-working man, and expected a lot of us as far as what it meant to be a man, and kind of that macho, more harsh side, I guess you will. And then my mom's the polar opposite, little blonde-haired school teacher, overly affectionate, always sweet. She kind of made up for what my dad maybe didn't have with vulnerability. But there was always a tension in my house because if my dad wasn't drinking, it seemed like he was on edge. And then my mom was always trying to spin things. She was always trying to help us take bad situations, and she would try to make them seem like they were good. But the problem is with that is you can say things with your, you can intellectually tell a story, but you can't take the feelings away from what's actually happening. So we could feel the pressure, the chaos, the struggle, no matter what my mom was saying. So there's always that tension in the house. Yeah, so early on, I really turned to music and to entertainment on TV. So it's the early 90s, and so rap music became my main influence. Sports figures like Michael Jordan and all that. I wanted to be an athlete, and it didn't take long to, little boy living way out in the country, because I was consuming so much content that, I wanted to be more of like a thug, more of like somebody who was defiant. I like that gangster mentality. I like that make your own rules. Also, I think inside really wanted to stand up for myself and to speak to share my emotions. But I learned quickly in my house that you don't talk about your feelings. You don't share what's going on with you. You just keep your mouth shut and you do what you're told. And so a lot of my influences were mainstream rap music like Tupac, Biggie Smalls, all that. It's weird to say, but I know a lot of people might be able to relate to it. When you don't have parents, all you can do is turn to what you see. And so I was consuming so much content from the world that became my role models. There was a few times that my parents would take me to my grandfather's late at night on Saturday, and we would get up and we would go to his church. But I don't know that they called it that, because it was like you go in, you color and have fun. It was kind of like a Sunday school for kids. So we never talked about God, or I don't ever remember anybody praying at my house. So yeah, I don't really have a lot to say about church as a kid, because it was not a part of my vocabulary. It wasn't a part of my intellect. there wasn't like a line that was set that you couldn't cross. So I was always trying to see how far off the line I could. And, you naturally, innately feel, um, hurt, or you feel upset like when you hurt somebody. So that was really how I managed what I did. How my actions made me feel was my moral standard. And as I got older, that line continued to grow where, I could hurt people and it didn't affect me. I think I learned this more from my mom. My mom would party and drink and stuff on the weekends, and our house would be chaotic. But once she became a teacher, she put on her makeup, she put on her clothes, and she went to work, and she was a teacher. And so, when I went to school and I was around other kids or anything like that, I learned to play the game. I never talked about anything that was going on in my house. Um, Always was more of a popular kid, an athlete. Um, I dressed nice, and so I learned from a very early age all the way up. I never discussed anything that was going on in my life or any kind of hurt or pain, or as far as like how I fit in with kids around me. I felt like it was just one of the guys, normal. There was nothing out of the ordinary. One of my best friends, that his parents were the same way, and my parents would party with his, and so that's just kind of what we did. We went to school, made straight A's, was on the, did 4-H, played basketball. I mean, we'd fight and stuff like that, like normal kids, but it wasn't over until later into high school years when I started to sort of be the person that I was at home, or what I saw at home in my normal life. Up until all through my middle school years, it was just a mask that I wore. And I learned early on that performing in front of people was okay, and that's what you're supposed to do, and that you're supposed to hide any kind of chaos and pretend like things are okay. So I started pretending at a young age, man. Yeah, I think what I was hiding was just the confusion, not understanding like why my dad was, stopped coming home, or, why on the weekend, like there was all the drinking going on, all the violence. Um, that was all confusing to me because I can even remember when my basketball coach had got sick. He got cancer, and there was people crying and stuff, and it was like, that was so confusing to me because I never saw anybody really cry in my house. As a teenager, things were so heavy that I trained myself not to feel, because the weight of being alone and abandoned by your parents is too much to handle. So what I did was I wanted people to see my ego. I wanted to keep you at a distance because I was more afraid of expressing what I was feeling inside than how you would feel about me. It was a scary place to be. It was more the emotional side. We didn't talk about anything. It was just quiet. If we did have dinner together, there wasn't a lot being said. Um, and there was always a lot of tension because my dad would fly off a lot at the handle. He was explosive. The only time I saw any kind of emotion was anger, except for when they drank. And when my parents would start drinking, it always got uncomfortable. Like if we had parties at our house, the men would be overly masculine, right? They might try to pick on me, or like I remember a guy put me in a sleeper hold until I cried, and they're laughing at me. And the women would be over sexualized when they start drinking and tell you you're cute and hug you in uncomfortable ways. And so there was just a lot of things going on that was confusing for 11, 12, 13-year-old kid. And so I just never really talked about any of that. What I did instead was I just overperformed. So like I'm gonna be the best basketball player. I'm gonna be the best student. I'm gonna do this. So that I'm gonna dress the best. So I think all the confusion that I was having on the inside, instead of trying to express that, I just did everything I could to hide it, so I could present myself as a strong, person who had it together. The big shift that happened in my life from middle school to high school was when my dad came home from a long drunken binge, and he'd been drinking. He would binge drink. He drank normally most of the time, as in, there wasn't just a few beers and he would kind of calm down, go to sleep. And then there would be like these binges, and it would progressively get worse. Alcoholism is a progressive disease. So like if you stop for a certain amount of time, it wasn't like you go back to the beginning. When you stop for 5 years, you go back to where you let off. And the disease continues, that spiritual malady continues to grow. And so like my dad, his alcoholism and his struggle with that just continued to grow. And so he came home, he'd been gone for a couple of days. And the last time he was there, he kind of tried to rough up my mom a little bit. And so when he came in, he started starting in with her. And my brother he was older then, he was almost graduated. So he kind of stepped in and was like, hey, this ain't gonna happen. And then next thing you know, we're all fist fighting and fighting. And I ran to my room and got this big plastic thing and was hitting my dad with it. And he went to his gun cabinet and got a gun. And he was threatening to kill us. It was just it was a crazy night. And it was like my whole family we broke at that moment. It was like there was clear lines that had been drawn. We always, as a teenager and you're getting older and your physical stature is getting older, we wanted to separate ourselves. We wanted to speak up when things were wrong, but we were afraid. And that was the moment that it was like, we're not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm gonna be my own man, and I'm not gonna allow certain things to happen in my house with my mom and so forth. So when that happened, everything just split, And then eventually, my dad just stopped coming home, and my brother went to college. So it was just me and my mom, and unfortunately, she pulled a muscle in her back not too long after my dad left, and she got prescribed prescription pain medication. That was the beginning of the opioid crisis, where you could still doctor shop. Now they have regulations on it, and so, my mom got to where she's taking 20 Lortab 10s every day or plus, and it was just chaos. She started having boyfriends that were drug dealers, and so my life just all of a sudden just changed quickly, where I'm having to fight her boyfriends, or she's not home, I'm coming home, nobody's there, there's no dinner, there's no food. Times when electricity be shut off, and so I was just 100% on my own. And I didn't have a concept of God or anything outside of myself. I just felt like it was up to me. You repeat what you see. And so I started smoking, I started drinking and doing what they were doing. And I realized that if I was gonna use drugs or drink alcohol, I was gonna have to be able to support this. And so, you really got three options. You can get a job, or you can start robbing people, or you can start selling drugs. And so for me, I started selling drugs just so I could sort of be like one of my friend in my friend group who smoked a little bit on the weekend or hanged out or had the latest tennis shoes, stuff like that. So that's where I picked up selling drugs in high school. And now I was this little kid that was a really good athlete, and had at least two parents at home. And now, just 2 years later, like, my mom's on drugs, my dad's gone, I'm dealing drugs, I'm living on my own completely at 16 years old. And so then it was just survival. I'm just trying to survive. The breaking point for me was when I was 17 years old, and my mom's boyfriend attacked me on the front porch, and he choked me out. And I realized that I could not defend myself, or I couldn't be the man of that house, and there was nowhere for me to go. So I packed my clothes in a garbage bag the summer of my senior year of high school, and I lived out of my garbage bag and bounced around on people's couches and stuff like that. The second lowest point was I was in a relationship with a young lady, and she got pregnant. And I was smoking and drinking a lot, and when she told me, I just hung up on the phone. I just hung up with her, just total jerk, and just feared. I didn't talk to her for like 2 weeks because I didn't want that responsibility. And then she called me, 2 weeks later, and said she had an abortion. And I don't know why, that just sent me down in the darkest place I ever was. You know, I'd always wanted to be an athlete, and here I was my senior year. I had hurt my knee. I had no stability. I couldn't even go to the doctor. My mom was so bad on drugs that, you know, she wouldn't take me to the doctor. That was one of the most devastating moments of my life, you know. And so I couldn't play. And then, you know, she had the abortion, and, you know, I just felt like I remember that feeling. I just felt like nothing. I felt like no one loved me. I just felt so alone. And it's a darkness that I wouldn't wish on nobody. I started to get further into that world of crime, and was committing small crimes and breaking into houses, and I got to the point where, you know, I wasn't necessarily managing the drug dealing as much as I was as just trying to party and not have to work and pay for it. And but I had, you know, still made good grades, and so I just went from this world of sort of drug dealing and partying and anything that came along with it. I was down for whatever. To I got just plumped into my freshman year of college in the dorm room, and it was just a different lifestyle then. Where back then it was a frat party every night, and, you know, I really got to, you know, get into the drug world and selling drugs. And but, you know, it didn't take long. You know, I was living like I'd stay up all night and I'd sleep all day. I wouldn't even see the sun. And you know, next thing you know, spring break comes around and everybody's wanting to go to, you know, on spring break. And I don't know, I just got this idea. A week before I left, I went to like a Christ Ambassadors, and the guy gets up there and he starts talking, and he's just like, you know, he's talking. It felt like he was talking to me, but it wasn't in a good way. You know, he's like, you come here and, you know, you're fake. And maybe he just thought I was there to check out the girls or something, but I was really actually there because I was hopeless. And he made a point to run me off, you know. And so I was like, oh, well, this ain't you know, I guess this ain't for me. So I packed a suitcase. You know, everybody was like, we're going to, like the friends that were with me, they were just trying to go for a week in Panama for spring break. But I had in my head, I was like, I'm just gonna leave everything and live in my car and see if I can find, you know, some sort of purpose in my life. And so I remember I left like my TV, PlayStation. I just packed a suitcase and just said, I'm gonna live in my car. I had $20, and so I apologized to all the gas stations out there because I would pull up and fill up with gas and just drive off. I didn't have no. It was survival, you know. I didn't have enough money for gas. I'll go through Walmart and get chicken, get food just to eat. You know, when I got down there, I started selling beads and stuff on the beach and hustling and selling T-shirts. And, you know, I had more money down there when I was living on my car than probably I had in my entire life. And but I would watch the sun go down. You know, I would every day. It was like I'd be sitting by the pool or something, and whatever was going on, whatever hotel I was hanging out at, and when I saw the sun, it was like I would run over to the beach and I'd watch the sun go down because I knew I was missing something in life, but I didn't know what it was. You know, long story short, one day I just decided to come home, kind of with this inclination that maybe things had changed. Like I've been gone for, you know, that was back when you didn't really have cell phones and stuff, so I hadn't talked to nobody in a year. And I came home to see my mom, and man, she was gone. Man, she was worse. She was on drugs bad, and my neighbor came over, and she's like, "Why don't you come stay with us?" And so I came to live with them, and I started actually running. I said, "Well, I guess I can go to the military." That was kind of my future. I was like, I can't keep doing this. So I started running and training, and But I woke up one Saturday morning or Sunday morning, was like, man, I need to try to find my dad. If I'm gonna enlist, I probably should at least try to see where he's at. And the only place I could think of was there was this basement that him and all his friends used to party at. They used to have big parties down there. So I drove down there to the basement. And I opened the sliding glass door and walked in, and I knew something was different because I didn't see no beer cans or ashtrays. And I kind of sat there for a little bit, and next thing you know, I look up, and my dad and this lady and a couple of people came in. They were all dressed nice, and I said, where y'all been? He said, church. I said, what's church? And he's like, well, you need to go talk to Brother Joy, which was the pastor. And he'd been remarried. It turns out that, my dad had hit rock bottom, and this pastor on Sunday mornings before he would come and preach to his congregation would go down to that basement. He would minister to my dad and all his friends. And my dad got saved. He gave his life to Jesus, got remarried and everything in that year that I was gone. I haven't seen my dad in like 2 or 3 years, and no relationship. And we're driving on a Monday morning to go see a pastor. And I came and sat down, kind of like a chair like this, and he opened up the Bible, and he was like, why? He said, well, he opened up his Bible, and he said, before we get started, tell us why you're here. And I said, I feel like I just got 2 big bulldozers on my shoulder, and I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life. But I've also felt like there's like a camera behind me, like somebody's been watching me. I know that I'm not here by myself. I don't know why I said that. That's what I said. I said, I know I'm not here by myself. And then he went through the book of Matthew, and he slowly told me who Jesus was. And he explained to me that all the crosses on the church, it wasn't because everybody that came there was good. It was because it was a hospital for the sick. And he taught me about sin. And about halfway through, he just stopped and said, you're ready. And he's like, you want to make Jesus Lord of your life? I got saved on a Monday morning. And then 3 days later, my dad and I got baptized together in that same church. Yeah, that's the story. I remember after I gave my life to Jesus, I got sober, I got changed in the same town that I was a drug dealer, I was a hellion, I was rebellious, and all I did was read my Bible and go to church. And the Word of God changed me from the inside out. It was hard to stop smoking weed. That was a tough one. It was hard because I didn't have any concept of like purity and living in a college town, putting away my relationships with women that were unhealthy, all of that. Over the next 6 months after that moment, I gave my life to Jesus. I let go of the world. I think a distinctive moment for me with the people that were around me was I went to this prayer group on college campus, and it was a group of the same people that I had tried to go and meet the week before I left to live out my car for a year. And I don't remember what was happening, but we were praying, and I just started, like, it was my turn to pray, and I just started screaming, just thank you, thank you, I mean, I was just yelling at the top of my lungs, just thank you, thank you, thank you. When I stopped praying and we got up, I looked around the room, and there was a couple people that I went to high school with. And they were like, man, they were like, I can't believe this, if there was anybody who's the least likely to be doing what you're doing, it's you. And I have to admit, like, I didn't have the same type of response to them because I could not understand why they didn't tell me who Jesus was. I was on the football team, I was on the basketball team. I was even the girl that I dated, like I found out like she was a Christian and she would go to church on Sundays. I mean, we never even just talked about God ever. And I was disgusted, and I was confused at why, because I mean Jesus, like that was truly my savior. I didn't have nothing and nobody, And even my dad, when he got sober or when he got saved, he still struggled with his sobriety, and so that relationship, I could only love him as much as he would allow me. So it was still, man, it was me and Jesus. I mean, that was my life. That's what changed me. And it's still been that way from that moment on. So I was more shocked that people were Christians and they didn't tell anybody. I could not believe that you follow Jesus, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. He can change anything, he can do anything. And you never told me, you never said a word. Man, that broke me. That really broke me. And so the next semester I started a class, and it was a service learning class. You only meet once a year or twice a year at the beginning of the class and the end of the class, and you provide a service in the community. I've been a Christian at that time for like, I don't know, 6 months. And I'll never forget the professor writing on the board, jail ministry. This was 22 years ago. And as soon as he wrote jail ministry on the board, like my heart just flipped. So I asked for the number. I called the guy. He said, yeah. And he said I could come on Sunday. But I got the times wrong. So I got there 30 minutes before he did. But I told the the administrator that, hey, I'm here for the jail ministry. So I'm sitting there and they bring all the guys in. It's me and like 30, 40 guys. And so I don't know what I was thinking, but I just started preaching. I got up, I got my Bible, I started teaching. And next thing you know, the guy that ran the ministry for like 20 years walked in and was like, oh, okay, you know? And so that's where things started progressing for me really quickly, because he really gave me an opportunity to share my story, to teach the Bible. And he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And shortly after that, I left. I flew 3,500 miles away from home. I went to Bible college and got to play some basketball out there. But I really didn't know much about the school, and I realized I'd only been a Christian for less than a year. And I got there, and they handed me a rule book with 375 rules, and it was a very, very legalistic place. I remember I was standing in line, and one of the professors walked up, and he rubbed his hand on the side of my face and said, "Hey, you need to go upstairs and shave." I said, "Why?" He said, "If you have facial hair, you're hiding sin." And so for the next 2 years when I was at that school, I started to feel that uneasiness, that tension that I used to feel at home, because I read the Bible. And remember, I got fresh eyes. I didn't go to church. I never heard anything except for what I had read. And when I would hear the preaching, it was contrary to what I was reading. And so, I left Bible college. I flew home kind of really just disappointed, defeated. I drove to go see the pastor that led me to the Lord on that Monday morning. And I found out that he had left with the woman in the church the day before. And so I just was like, man, I don't know about church people. I was confused. And it didn't take me long. Scripture says like a dog returns to his vomit, a fool returns to his folly. So I moved back in with a friend of mine that was still in the drug game and drinking. And it took me about 60 days or so to get back into that lifestyle. But the first night I went out, this girl walked in. We went to go see some live music. And it was the first time I ever saw my wife, Josie, when she walked in. And thank God I saw her. And she was trying to counsel me and encourage me, and I was still going, the opposite way. Eventually, we had our first child, and she got pregnant with our second child, and I felt a lot of that pressure and that weight again of how am I going to provide for myself. And I was still in school, and so, I've got 2 family members serving a life sentence related to drug dealing, and I just went back to what I knew best, and I started dealing drugs again. After I, felt the call to ministry, after I felt the call to become a pastor, that's why I'm so big on application and understanding, because if you don't understand, you can't apply. And a lot of times people get saved and they don't even know what the scriptures mean. And so, yeah, I got indicted for trafficking cocaine in 2009. Next thing you know, I wake up in a jail cell. I'm 25 years old. I've been a Christian for 4 years. And, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And I'll never forget, I got one phone call. By that time, Josie had already, moved away from me. She separated herself because I had made it back to just that scared, angry, confused teenager again. and I was emotionally abusive and distant, and the only person I cared about was me. I called her, and I don't know why, but I kind of braced myself. I was like, and I said, hey, I got arrested, and she says, this is God. I'm like, what? What'd you say? Did you hear what I said? I got indicted, you know? She's like, this is God. She said, I believe in you. I believe God's got a plan for you. I believe God's going to use this. And she gave me more hope in that 5-minute call than I had in 25 years. And I heard my son, JR, he's now 18 years old. He was 1 year old at the time. And I heard him say, Daddy. And when he said that, something just changed in me. I thought about my dad, and I thought about all my uncles and all the men in my family that are drug addicts or alcoholics or in jail. And it takes one moment to change, one moment. And that moment, I had a little bit of willingness. I said, I want to do something different with my life. And, the next day, I had an opportunity. I talked to my lawyer, and he said, you want to go to prison or do you want to go to rehab? And I told him I didn't really know the difference, so I had to talk to him. And interesting enough, I went back to my cell, and there was a guy that was recruiting me for a gang. And we developed a really close relationship in the drug game and stuff like that. And I told him, and he was like, man, listen, don't even forget this gang stuff, go to rehab, man. Try to do something different. And I respect him for that. And I took his advice, and I left. It was a different state. They let me come to the Salvation Army on North 1st Street, downtown Nashville, right next to the Titans Stadium. I went there, and I was awaiting trial the whole time. I got there on a Monday evening about 5 or 6 o'clock, and the next morning, Long Hollow Church actually came the first time ever, and they started Celebrate Recovery on that Tuesday morning. Every Tuesday is when we met. Then they started busing us out to their services. So I'm in a different state 17 days after my indictment and my arrest. I'm on a bus going to Long Hollow and to Celebrate Recovery. Now today, I oversee all of it, and I'm on staff at Long Hollow. So it seems like God knew what he was doing 17 years ago. I always say that I didn't get arrested, I got rescued. And so I'm still living in that rescue mission. And Josie and I have been married now for 18 years. We have 3 children. I've never drank or used since the day I was arrested 17 years ago. None of my children ever see me drunk or using. They see me make mistakes, but I'm proud of that. I've never cheated on my wife. I've never done anything like that. I've been faithful to Josie, and it's a miracle. Those things may seem normal to some people that are watching this, but for me and my family and my world, that's not what it's supposed to be. Statistically, I'm supposed to be in prison. Statistically, I'm supposed to be in a divorce situation. My kids are supposed to be struggling. Like, statistically, I'm not supposed to be in this chair, but it's not about statistics, it's about my Savior. And so Jesus rewrote my story, and I'm so grateful that he did. I can't take any credit for it. I didn't have this vision, I didn't have this idea. It was God stepping into my life, and he chose that for me, and I'm so grateful. And one thing that we realized is that there was other men like me who were getting arrested or were struggling with drugs and alcohol, and they were Christians. And they actually wanted to do the right thing. They wanted to, they just didn't know how. Even today, a lot of times when someone asks for help, the first person they're gonna see is not somebody that's a follower of Jesus. They're gonna see somebody who their perspective is gonna be from a medical perspective or so forth. So that's why Josie and I, we founded Recovery Refuge. We wanted people who come forward on Sunday morning or when they're getting out of jail or prison, the first person they see to be somebody who is a Bible-believing Christian that has walked the path they walked and are now living in freedom. And we now have 2 houses where 14 men live. If you're watching this and you have a similar story as mine, I want you to do this simple thing. Ask for help. You can ask God or someone that you trust, because it's okay not to be okay. One of my favorite verses in Psalms is where it says that the Lord hears the sound of our prayers. When you translate the word sound in Hebrew, it actually literally means voice. And what I've always been struck by that is that God knows the sound of my voice. There are billions of people on planet Earth, but He knows the sound of my voice. And the flip side is, do I know the sound of His? And so the way I try to live that out, because He's given me a message. I lived in a mess and He gave me a message. The way that I try to live that out is I want to make sure that I'm positioning myself, that I have a rhythm with my spirituality, that I can hear the voice of God. So I start my days in silence. I journal, I read, I pray, and I try to look for the interruptions. I try to look for the opportunities so that I can be His hands and His feet. Because I walk around with this idea that I'm a messenger of God. And the only way that I can hear a message, or the only way I can give a message, is if I hear it clearly. So I want to make sure that I'm listening for the voice of God. Because if we're His sheep, we can hear His voice clearly. So the way that I live out every day is just being sensitive to the Holy Spirit, not rushing, making sure that, what does God want me to do? Making sure that before I do things, before I say things, before I give, before I go, I make sure that God's going to be there. That's what Moses said in Exodus, I think it's 33 or 34. He said, hey, God, is your presence going to be there? Because if your presence isn't there, I don't want to go. And if I don't want my voice to be amplified, I want the voice of God to be heard. So I want to go where God's presence is. And in order for me to do that, I got to be sensitive to it. I got to position myself where I can hear from God and I can make sure that I'm walking in His presence. And I try to live that out on a daily basis. I don't do it perfectly, but that's the goal for my days. My name's Adam French, and I am a voice amplified for Christ.
That's it.
All right, appreciate y'all guys. That's fun, man.
You gotta get a picture.
Oh yeah, let's get a pic.
Great job. Seriously.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for this.